Hey everyone, Learning Pastor back here. It's been a couple months since I've done a video. I'm going to try to still do a little bit better than that. Hopefully every 3-4 weeks and months, but been a busy season in the summer, as I'm sure it is for a lot of you. But just wanted to take a moment to plug a book that's been well discussed on this channel, and it's a classic Christian book, and it's the book none other than Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This is the reader edition, so it's got some footnotes, got an introduction in it. It's got some clarifying footnotes to help people understand what Bonhoeffer means. It's got a great introduction here as well. That's an updated kind of scholarly introduction that's helpful also. But I've been taking our church through Discipleship, Bonhoeffer's book here, over the past 2 months, and we've got a few more weeks left, and we've broken it up into 9 weeks of discussion. And I want to encourage you all, if you're thinking about books to use for small groups or books to use for your church, or just a class to use in your Sunday school program, or maybe just to encourage small groups to consider classic books. But his book, in my view, is really the standard for Christian discipleship in many respects. But most importantly, I want to commend the book to you because I really believe Bonhoeffer cuts to the heart of true Christian discipleship, and in many ways puts Jesus back into the middle of discipleship instead of just the practices that are important, practices of piety. And piety, he doesn't diminish here. He says how important those practices are, especially as he talks about Matthew chapter 6. But he does not do it at the expense of following Jesus particularly, and how important it is to make sure Jesus is in the middle of discipleship from the first step to the last step. And I think in many ways he returns Jesus to the center of the Christian life and the center of discipleship, or the pathway of following after Jesus. And he, as a good Reformation disciple, he also continues to emphasize the call of Jesus and how it's really not, I pick myself up, I kind of do these pietistic things, and I go to church and I just try to keep up this pattern of efforts. And while again, piety and disciplines are important to Bonhoeffer, he really allows us to not get lost in all those principles and patterns, while important, at the expense of the person of Jesus and the pathway of following him. And I just think it's a real helpful corrective for well-intentioned Christians and churches to get back to the center of Christian discipleship in a way that allows, I think will even galvanize many Christian lives and churches because of the way he goes about almost systematically explaining that discipleship is really starting with the person and work of Christ, the community of Christ, or Christ in community, as he is so famously known for, of where we're incorporated or grafted in, and then talking about how it's a cross kind of following, self-denial. It's a lament, though also exuberant, underneath the cross. And then he gets into the principles of piety, the principles of obedience, in the sense of what does it look like, outside the church. What does it look like to the observer, to those that are still in the crowds and the commotion of the world? He does a really good job of kind of starting with where the call of Christ confronts us as believers and calls us from our situation into living faith and to active following. And then he shows it's also kind of tailored towards self-denial because of the cross, but it's in the context of community with other followers to the left and right of me, Christ under the cross with me, and following hard after him, but yet with gracious joy because of what he's done for me. And there's an exuberance to it, yet also a very difficult kind of adversity to following Christ that are kind of paradoxical. And so really the whole book is unpacking the statement of Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Come to me, all you are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For take upon yourselves my yoke. It is easy and light. Learn from me, as Jesus says. And this is really what Bonhoeffer is unpacking. This passage through the entirety of this book. And the first half of the book is more directly unpacking that. The second half of that book is speaking about the broader ritualistic practices commanded and commended and confirming by Jesus through the practice of baptism, the Lord's table, the showing up together into church community, and the corporate life of the church. And these things in service, in love, in mutuality of fellowship, these things are really the overflow of discipleship in a context of community. So he starts with the believer personally. He shows how they're incorporated out from the world into the community of Christ. He talks about how this is a community with Jesus that's also a suffering community. There's much lament and adversity, but it's also joyful and exuberant. And then he works out towards disciplines and practices and piety of how that looks like in the world. He's very much for that, just not for that becoming what discipleship is in its essence. And then he gets into how does this look like corporately in a local church in the latter third of the book. I want to commend this book to you because I think there's a reason it's a classic. And again, while he's certainly more Lutheran than Reformed, if you're following this channel, you're probably more on the side of that Reformed background. But there's a lot to commend in this book. And really, he's more broadly, I would say, reformational in his moorings, and though certainly indebted to Martin Luther particularly, and that comes out especially in the first half of the book. But he's really someone to learn from. He's as the president of the seminary I went to one time mentioned in a chapel service. He said, there are just times that we need to learn to sit, yes, at the feet of Jesus at all times, but certain followers that God has endowed with brilliance and clarity and understanding. Typically, we call them the great theologians. And I think while Bonhoeffer is not certainly the one to emulate in all those things, he's not the most theologically conservative, and there's some issues at times with him for sure. But in this area of community and discipleship, we need to learn to sit at one of the master's feet of this area of ministry and this importance for the church today. So I commend this to you as something to read personally, maybe in a small group, even if you are the discipleship coordinator, or Christian ed director, the pastor of the church, or the assistant pastor over this area. I would really encourage you to include this into the diet of this ministry, because I think in many ways it really gives you a return to that kind of drama of following Christ Jesus. And so hope that's an encouragement. Sorry, my kids are walking in there. I am in real time here as a pastor. So hope this is encouragement to you, and I hope it'll bless your life. All right, sign off.